In this video, I'll be making every X-Men movie in Lego, starting off from the very first X-Men movie all the way up to Deadpool 3, so let's go. For X-Men 1, I decided to do the scene where Magneto lifts the cars up, as it was one of my favorite scenes from the movie when I was younger. So I got the base and then made a little facade of the building behind Magneto using a bunch of these 2x1 grey pieces, and then I ended up piling a bunch of those on top to make the building a little bit taller. I then used a bunch of these slope pieces to represent some of the destruction of the building that had been caused by Magneto, and then added a few of these tile pieces in grey to represent the pathway. I then used a bunch of these 2x2 green tile pieces to represent the grass, and then I also added in a few of these 1x1 sloped green pieces to give the grass a little bit of texture. Added in some more of the sloped grey pieces to give it a little bit more rocky texture, and then I tiled off the top of the building. Added this little buggy with some translucent pieces on top. Added Sabretooth, Magneto, and an officer, and here is the mock done for the first X-Men film. For X-Men 2, I decided to build Professor X's Cerebro, as it is a very iconic location in the X-Men franchise. So I started off by getting the base and using a bunch of these 2x2 tile pieces to tile it off. I then used a bunch of these 2x1 and 2x2 grey bricks to make a big wall at the back of the base, and this was going to be used as a support. I then also made the bridge and placed that onto the wall and integrated inside of it so it wouldn't fall out. And then I also added the little door area here as well to represent the circular door that is also a very iconic feature of the Cerebro room. I then ended up adding a bunch of these 2x4 black plates, tiling them off, and then adding this chair for Magneto, and here is the Cerebro done. For X-Men The Last Stand, I wanted to do the final fight between Wolverine and Jean Grey. So I used a bunch of these 2x1 pieces with the studs on the side. And then I decided to make another base, and I wanted to make a sort of rocky structure to represent all of the destruction that was caused by Jean Grey. And this is pretty much what the base is going to look like. And then I also added some more of these slope pieces to represent a little bit of a platform for Jean Grey to stand on. Added a few flame pieces as well by the rock structure. Added my Wolverine minifigure as well as Jean Grey, and here is the build complete. X-Men Origins Wolverine was definitely one of my favorite X-Men movies growing up, and I really like the scene where Wolverine was in the tank and got the adamantium claws, so I decided to recreate the scene. So first off, I decided to make the actual tank using a bunch of 2x2s and 2x1 grey bricks, pile them on top of each other to add a bit more depth, and then I used a bunch of these 2x2 light grey bricks to represent some supports, and then put some plates on top of those to represent a sort of platform for the scientists to stand on, and then added some more plates underneath to give the platform a little bit more support. And then I also ended up tiling it off with a bunch of these light grey tiles, and then I added these support barrier pieces at the front. I then added some more tiles as well, and then I ended up adding some black tiles around the actual tank. Added some computer systems on the side, and then I also added two scientists at the top, a scientist on the computers, Logan in the tank, and here we go. I will say I wasn't the biggest fan of X-Men First Class when I was younger. However, I do quite like the ending scene where Magneto comes in with his new suit. So I decided to recreate this scene, and if I'm being completely honest with you, it's a pretty boring scene because it is just basically a grey room. So what I decided to do was use a bunch of these grey brick pieces and use the side where it has the one line showing to give a bit of texture to the wall. And then I also used a bunch of the 2x1 pieces with the studs on the side, and you'll see why I did that in a bit. I then tiled off the top, and then used a few of these 2x2 pieces to represent these little supports on the wall there, just to give the wall a little bit more texture. And then just to give the floor a bit more texture as well, I just ended up adding some more of these 2x2 tiles, placing Magneto and the other minifigure, and here we have the build done. I absolutely love the Wolverine movie that released in 2013, and I really like the final fight scene between Wolverine and the Silver Samurai, so let's recreate that scene where Wolverine's claws are chopped off. So here we have the base, and I want to keep this one quite small, mainly because there's not really too much going on in that scene besides the Wolverine and Silver Samurai on the bridge. So I made the bridge, added the support barriers, and then I decided to add a few of the computers on the bottom of the base there. Added the Silver Samurai, added Wolverine, put the claw in one of the studs, and here we go. For X-Men Days of the Future Past, I wanted to do the scene where Wolverine goes up against the younger version of Magneto in the football stadium. So I brought back the base, and then I decided to use a bunch of these black pieces just to give a bit of the effect of the stadium. So I ended up piling them on top of each other to represent a sort of tiered effect. Added a bunch of these sloped grey pieces and a few of these 1x1 sloped green pieces as well, just to represent some rubble and destruction. Added a bunch of the 2x2 green tiles to represent the grass structure of the football stadium, and then added a few more rocky structures here and there. I then added some more of the tiles behind, added Magneto and put Wolverine there, and added 2 chairs. Quicksilver was definitely my favorite character in X-Men Apocalypse, and I really like the scene where he rescued the civilians from the X-Mansion whilst it was exploding. So I decided to recreate that scene. Now, I wanted to make it on the small base, so what I did was I recreated a little facade of the X-Mansion, added some glass pieces as well as some fire pieces, and then added some tan and green tiles, added some grey destruction, and then I also added Quicksilver with 2 civilians on a table build, and here we have the final product. The Deadpool films definitely are some of my most favorite Marvel movies to date, and I wanted to do the maximum effort scene from the first Deadpool movie. So I got the base, and then I used a bunch of these 2x2 grey bricks and 2x1 grey bricks as well, and some slopes to make a big wall at the back. And then what I did was I added these pieces to represent the studs on the side, and you see why I did that in just a bit. And then I also expanded the wall, made it a little bit taller, and then expanded it outwards. Added this little support area here for Deadpool to sit on, made the road, added the car, added the translucent pieces here to represent Deadpool sort of flying down into the car, added a little speaker, and added Deadpool with his drawing. I think that we can all agree that Logan was definitely a great movie to send off this variant of Hugh Jackman's Wolverine, and I wanted to do the final fight scene as it is a really cool and brutal, intense sequence. I did the log, and then I also added some trees as well, and I added a bit of greenery on the base with some of these tile pieces, some slopes, and some leaf pieces. I added Logan on the log, put X24 on one of the leaf pieces, and then added Laura, and here we have the build complete. As this is an X-Men video, I kind of want to do a bit of the interior of the X-Mansion, so I decided to do the scene from Deadpool 2 where Wade is talking to Colossus in the X-Mansion room. So I got the base and added a bunch of these brown pieces on the sides to make the outer walls. I integrated a fireplace in there as well, and then I ended up adding some more brown pieces around the outside. Made some of the windows using a bunch of these glass pieces, and then I also ended up adding some slopes onto the fireplace. I ended up tiling off the top just to make it look a little bit cleaner, and then I made the sofa, which is in green and black, and this is the sofa that Wade does actually sit on. I then made a table in the middle and then repeated the same technique that I used for the other sofa on the other side. I then took the table off and just made a little bit of a carpet section underneath and then put it back on. Added some old ornaments around the room, added Wade with his mask and Colossus, and here we go. I have to say I'm not a massive fan of X-Men Dark Phoenix, however I thought that the train fight sequence towards the end of the film was a pretty cool fight scene, so I decided to do that scene. So in order to do this, what I did was I ended up using the base, and I basically made a massive grey wall around it. Added some of these slope pieces to represent the hole which Cyclops does end up bursting with his lasers, and then I also ended up using a bunch of these snot pieces that I ended up changing from the 2x1s, and then essentially what I tried to do was make a little bit of a vent system just to add a little bit of texture to the build and not make it look so plain. Added a bit of rubble and destruction, a platform, some tiles on the bottom to give the floor a bit of texture. Added Magneto as well as some troopers, Beast, Professor X, and Cyclops, and here we have it. I wanted to make a scene from Deadpool and Wolverine as the last film, so I decided to make the ending scene from the trailer where they're jumping into the portal. So I ended up making the area where they actually jump out from using a bunch of these grey pieces as well as some tan pieces to represent the sandy border, and then I ended up putting it onto the base using some translucent pieces. Added a bunch of tiles on the base and some slope pieces to represent the rocky destruction, and then I also ended up adding a tile piece here with a stud in the middle, and then attaching the portal build to it, and then I added Deadpool and Wolverine on the top of the area where they jump from, and here is the build done. And I gotta say, overall I think it looks really great, and it's definitely a really fun way to end the video. If you did enjoy, then make sure to subscribe and like the video and turn on notifications, and I'll talk to you soon.